I want to show some PlasmaCam work today. This is JD Brewer. You've seen him we've been working together on some videos. The PlasmaCam is in his shop now. It just made a lot of sense. Started thinking about, how little I was using it and how much he could use it. And he's within driving distance, and if I need something, I've been seeing stuff pop up on Instagram lately. He's Apexish on Instagram, by the way, APEXISH. He's been doing a lot of different little jobs and working his way, learning this thing. So I've seen you do that simple bracket for the tie down on the trailer, welding cart, stainless steel cart for a factory that's going to hold some chemicals. You've just been playing around with some fonts and cutting out
making so
shapes.
many signs.
Yeah, I noticed you cut out a emblem, a logo for the Welding Tips and Tricks podcast back there.
Been working on trying to get that.
I'll show you that in just a minute. One of the first things everyone does with their PlasmaCam is to create their own logo or their own sign. And it's a pretty good idea. You got to have something to practice on and learn the software. So that's the Welding Tips and Tricks podcast logo on the left, and then JD's logos on the right there. And what started this project, we're building a fire pit today, by the way. He posted this on Instagram. He said, I scored this on a job site, 1/4-inch tread plate. They were going to throw it out. This is a stand that his helper, Wyatt, designed from start to finish and welded up and everything for the plasma cutter to get it up off the floor. Just to kind of show you what can be done with very little training on it. Here's an end to JD's welding cart that he's working on with a Husky toolbox inside of it. This is a dual cylinder holder thing and a very low profile where you don't have to lift the bottle. You just tilt the bottle up just a little bit, catch a lip, and then it slides right into place. And every year older you get, that becomes more and more important. So we pull in the logo here as a bitmap, and that saves some time as far as smoothing lines and things like that. A lot of programs will require a vector file, and that's one thing about the PlasmaCam software is it lets you use a bitmap and saves you a lot of line smoothing and stuff. So we're going to pull in JD's logo and my logo, and we're going to cut them into side of a fire pit. That's what we're making today, a fire pit. We're taking a stab at it. Neither one of us have made one yet, but we're going to make these cutouts so that when there's a fire, you'll be able to see flames through these things. So it's an idea anyway. We'll see how it works out. It's really easy to center stuff up and to size things because each dot on this grid here represents an inch. So that's a good reference. You can get an idea of the size of things. You do a lot of zooming in and zooming back out on this. You can zoom in and really get precise on where your lines are, and you can still mess up. You'll see later on we messed up. I won't give it away just yet, but once you get something you like, you just copy and paste it. So we just, copied and pasted that 2 more times, and it's going to be a 6-sided fire pit with legs. So we're about ready to start the cutting. And this is where we learned that we made a mistake and didn't get a cut path just right, and so it dropped the whole thing out of the logo. So to go back in and tweak that a little bit, and we just figured, you know what, we can weld that back in place for what it is, being a fire pit. It will be still a good fire pit, and we're just going to keep moving on. By the way, this fire pit is going to belong to Wyatt, JD's helper. So we're going to let him do quite a bit of the welding on it and let him have some input as far as, how the legs go and whatnot. So he's getting a huge fire pit, actually a little too big. Maybe he'll think it's just right when he, has a bunch of people over. I don't know, but never built one before, but I know it's much bigger than most of them that I've seen, and it's going to be a little bit heavy. Going to have some help getting it to his house. Once it's there, it'll probably be awesome. Making the bottom of it now, and we're just kind of playing this by ear. You can see how you zoom in. You can zoom in really a lot and really be really precise where you put your points. Looking back, it would probably been better for us to do this first. Make this piece first, the bottom, and then we'd have the dimensions of the sides, and then there would be no guesswork involved. But we're just having to do a little bit of trial and error here to make the straight lines here match the pieces that we already cut. But tells you how long they are, and that's a big benefit. And we were only maybe just a few thousandths off, and it worked out just fine. You can see the pan in the bottom. Right now, that thing is just running on that dump funnel. But JD's got plans. He's already run this ductwork. It runs to a big dust collector with a big squirrel cage fan on the other end. and he's going to build a big vent hood over top the PlasmaCam. This design for the vent holes, for the breathing holes, went a little bit overboard there. I made the suggestion that we kind of make a grid like a floor drain. And in hindsight, I think that was a dumb suggestion because you lose quite a bit of strength when you do that. So we should have just popped some holes in there and like most people do and called it good. This is Tilly. She's hanging around in the shop today. She's a good dog. That's Zach's dog. This is Wyatt, JD's helper. It's going to be his fire pit, so we're going to let him do quite a bit of welding on this thing today.
It's a drive-by shooting.
Sometimes when you get that stutter when you're tack welding with a MIG gun, sometimes it's a bad ground, sometimes you got your wire feed set too high, sometimes it's a combination of both. In this case, I think the wire feed speed was set a bit high because we dropped it down a little bit later and things got quite a bit better. But that was the recommended setting, and I find that for most of the charts on inside of most machines are a bit high on the wire feed. It's a good starting place though. That's a nice open joint, not quite an outside corner joint, not a 90-degree outside corner joint anyway, but it's gonna let us lay some nice welds in there from the outside. So we'll get a decent fit up on these things and we'll weld them out. Still stuttering there a good bit, but you can see we don't have a direct ground here. It's laying on the work table. A lot of times that's the cause. But again, we did find out that when we dropped the wire feed speed to about 280 instead of 320, things got quite a bit better. We're using 035 wire today. Now this is one of those things we accidentally cut out and we're having to tack back in, and I think actually we got it tacked in backwards. But after the fact, Wyatt didn't care. It still looked good. It fit in sort of like it's supposed to, but I think we got the tread on the wrong side. And like I said, he didn't care. We're just putting several tacks on these things. No point in doing a whole lot of welding on them. And at this point, we turned the wire feed speed down to 280. A lot less stuttering with the wire down like it is.
Sure is.
Wyatt has done very little welding. He's just starting to learn, and so a project like this is a perfect opportunity just to let him get some practice. And he's not doing too bad. Also, during this project, we're going to let him get a taste of the bare wire with 7525, and we're going to swap over to dual shield flux core. So this is JD here. We're going to try to get an arc shot here so the gun's in JD's hands. This is the bare wire, 280 inches a minute, about 20 volts. Just a very slight oscillation. Not a whole lot of gun movement, just enough to play the light a little bit and make sure to wrap the corners. Just traveling along at a nice steady speed. JD's using a sort of a slight push angle, but a weld like this could be made with a 90-degree angle, slight push, slight pull. Doesn't make a whole lot of difference. I'll list the settings used right here. If you can hit the pause button if you want to remember that or write it down. It worked out pretty good. Now we're going to swap over to the knurled drive rollers for 035. We're going to swap over to dual shield flux core. You really need knurled rollers for dual shield flux core, or any flux core for that matter. And we're going to use the manual mode here. It's got pre-programmed settings like a MIG C25 or a stick and things like that. But we're going right over into manual so we can just adjust the voltage and wire feed speed manually. So the first stab we're going to take is at 21 volts, 270 inches a minute with this. And we'll tweak it here and there as we do the different welds on this thing. And as JD welds with it and Wyatt welds with it. You watch the edges of that puddle. It's a nice hot puddle. It's just really going over those edges and melting them in nice. And again, he's using a very slight push angle, and the same thing applies here. You could use a slight drag, a slight push, 90 degrees, pretty forgiving. This is 035 Lincoln 71M dual shield flux core. And again, I'll do the same thing with this on the final weld. I'll list the parameters if anybody's interested in writing that down. Dual shield flux core wires, the settings are a little bit different from brand to brand, but a starting place can save you a little time. And there is just a little bit of cleanup with dual shield flux core. The slag comes off quite a bit easier than stick. Of course, you know, with bare wire MIG, there's almost no cleanup. Those are the settings if you want to write them down, and we'll keep going. As I mentioned, this is a rather large fire pit, and it's getting heavier every time we add a piece to it, which is pretty normal. Putting the gun in Wyatt's hand again. This is his fire pit. We're going to let him get some practice, and best place to do it is on something that's going to belong to him. I'm surprised at how easily he is doing these vertical uphill welds, because there's no real manipulation required. Here he's doing sort of a vertical, you know, almost overhead weld, and he's going to do some overhead welding later on as well.
Don't be nervous, Wyatt. You got 3 people taking pictures of you.
It's pretty awesome that
Burned it out.
you can give your helper the gun and he can do something like that.
Yeah, and like I said, I haven't taught him how to do this yet.
Wow.
Yeah,
Good job, Wyatt.
Really, those are the best ones I've seen you make.
Yeah.
You can sharpen it up on the belt?
I probably will.
There you go. You can sitting back looking like this.
This is awesome.
Because I always have to use it for chipping out like concrete out of the pockets that they pour over it.
Let's lay it down and slide it off. Lay it to me.
Wyatt cut out some legs at 45-degree angles, and we were going to put them on there like this, but it just seemed too big of a footprint and too hard to handle, so we just kind of asked Wyatt about putting them like this and making them look kind of like there's some motion going on all in one direction. It looks a little bit funky, but he was good with it, and that's what we went with. A good thing we only had one tack weld on each one of the legs, just to kind of get an idea if it was going to work. So it was very easy just to snap them off. Retack weld, get a final buy off from Wyatt. You like the way this thing looks? You sure you're okay with it? And he was. So we drove on. Come on.
What's in there? What's in there?
There we go.
Hey, it worked.
It's definitely got airflow.
Dual shield or hardwire?
Dual shield for sure.